Hello and welcome to In the Light, Growing Your Soul with me, Anna Isabel. And my guest today is Christi Hoffman, who has written a very exciting book called Real Life Angel Encounters. Well, Christi, hello and welcome.
Thank you so much for having me, Anna. I really am happy to be here.
Your book, you know, when I'm reading it, I can't stop smiling. It's
Oh,
just so lovely. And I guess, because we're talking about angels and not everybody believes in angels or knows much about them, it would be good to start with what are angels?
yes. Well, let me just jump in here before I get to that. That there is a recent study, well, at least in the United States, that it's like 6 out of 8 Americans believe in angels, right? So that's quite a few. So what angels are now, I should say that Real Life Angel Encounters, the book, is based on my podcast, Real Life Angel Encounters, which is an award-winning podcast. It won a storytelling award. And there's a very loose definition in both the podcast and the book. So, in a general, broad sense, angels are non physical beings who want to help and assist humanity. Now, they can take many forms, at least how I define this. They can have the wings and the halo and the robes and all of that. Not a problem. They can take any form that they wish. So sometimes they'll show up in human form. And I've actually talked to at least one person who knows that she's an angel in human form on the podcast. They can take the form of our loved ones. So our loved ones angels? Not necessarily in the strictest sense, but they are beings who are set to help us. And they can be ascended masters. Ascended masters are a mixed bag. Some are deities such as Apollo or Lu or Pele. Some of them have been people such as Saint Germain or Jesus or Yogananda. And then there are many beings in the non-physical who are set to help us. Now, also in the book and the podcast, we can be sent to the right place at the right time with the right message by these angelic beings. So they can be us. We can take that form as well. Just all it takes is a little push on the back to get us going, a little whisper in the ear to say, hey, reach out to that woman that you see is struggling, right? So all of these things can take so many forms.
So your definition is somewhat looser than the
Yes,
definition that holds that angels are beings who have never been human.
right, right,
Okay.
right. Now I have to say, I have to take issue with that because there are two archangels who have been human,
Yeah,
Sandalphon and
exception.
Metatron. Yes, right. They were respectively Enoch and Elijah in the Bible, and they had been human, which is why they have the strange archangel names. Most archangels, their names end with EL, like Raphael, Haniel, Jophiel. But Metatron and Sandalphon were given these different names to delineate them as having a different quality, a different dimension to them.
So this is a looser definition that you're operating because what you're doing is you are really describing kind of magical, miraculous experiences uh,
Yes.
in which somebody has turned up. And I felt that your title was a play on words, Real
Yes.
Life Angel Encounters, because is it real life angelic humans or angels as humans?
Yes.
And you're playing with both.
Yes.
And
I'm so happy that you got that.
good.
People, most people do not get that. No, it's a wide, very wide umbrella. And these. these beings kind of defy definition. Now, recently, well, let's see, this is going to be the next episode that comes out on Real Life Angel Encounters. I interviewed Nigel Watson, who's a UFO researcher. And you think, well, why is a UFO researcher on a podcast about angels? Well, since you've read Real Life Angel Encounters, and for those who have listened to season 1, there is a story in there that says we're all aliens somewhere. Now, the story there, we're all aliens somewhere, this woman, Mary, her mother told her the story of how she may have been conceived by an extraterrestrial. So it kind of opens up a whole new can of worms. And she later had experiences that pointed both toward angelic or alien, extraterrestrial. And so she found the podcast to tell her story because she wasn't sure what to Google. Do I Google extraterrestrial encounters? Angel extraterrestrials? What do I Google? So she kind of Googled the whole thing and came out with Real Life Angel Encounters. Now, in Nigel Watson's interview, he had just written an article for Fortean Times about this overlap between the angelic presence and extraterrestrial presence. And there's it's like a Venn diagram, and in the middle is this high strangeness, as he describes it. His chapter of his most recent book, Portraits of, what is the title of that? But it's about alien encounters in the UK, and chapter 11 is all about angels that are these extraterrestrials. So it's quite interesting, and that's why I like to have this broad umbrella, because there are so many things that we don't know, Anna. You know what I mean? There's so many things that are we think we have a handle on, but there could be so much more.
Yes, indeed. I can see that. So setting aside the definition of who is responsible for these miraculous events, what role do you feel that signs and synchronicities play in setting things up?
The signs and things that come up are typically our messages from these beings, because them being non-physical, it takes a lot of energy for them to show up in a physical form. But these signs and symbols and synchronicities are really orchestrated energetically in the background. So things like you're thinking of a loved one and their favorite song comes on the radio. You are looking for a sign from your deceased sister, and this is actually in the book. And there is a song that just jumps out that has the precise symbol you were looking for from her. That another story from the book, you're going through a very, very dark time, and the pizza delivery guy goes into the college dorm that you're smoking a cigarette outside of, comes back, gets down the way, and then turns around and comes back and says, you know, God's listening to you. Everything's going to be okay. So this way, our angels and our guides, like, was the pizza guy an angel? Probably not. He's probably a pizza guy. But some angelic presence, some unseen guide had whispered to him, hey, that girl needs a message of hope. Turn around and give her a message of hope. It's much easier for our helpers to work in that way. And it's going to be more acceptable. I mean, we hear stories of Joan of Arc, having this light come, and Moses with the burning bush. If any of us saw these things today, we'd probably run screaming and not get the message. But these other ways in them showing up are much more understood by us and much more acceptable by us.
So yes, it needs to be more subtle, and yet I think they have a harder job now than ever before, because people are so they need subtle, but they also need to be hit over the head in order to accept that it's real. So it's a fine balance for our guides and angels to strike. Tell us about your experience, your personal experience of angels. How did you get interested in this? How did it all begin?
Yes. Um, so it all began when I was a child, just a baby, and I was seeing ghosts and talking to them. And through my life, I knew that there was much more out there because I could see it, feel it, talk to it, and but I just didn't know what it was. And my mother took us, well, we went to a Unitarian church when I was little growing up, and my mother took us to church one Sunday, and the minister was talking about Zen Buddhism as part of a series on world religions. And his talk included the idea of reincarnation, rebirth, and karma. And I said, that's the thing that makes sense to me. Christianity never made sense, although my grandparents tried and tried and tried, but it never made sense. But the reincarnation, rebirth, karma, that made sense. And so my beliefs took a little bit different turn, but I was still having these experiences. Fast forward many, many years. I was married, and my husband decided he wanted to have a different family experience. So he decided to leave the family. And I started Googling, you start Googling these things: soul contracts, soulmate, reincarnation, all of these things. I found Dolores Cannon, which, if is this a video podcast? Is that on YouTube?
Yes, yes.
There's a picture of Dolores Cannon on the shelf over my head. So I thought it was video. And I found Dolores Cannon and discovered her work. I really wanted to have a session with her because she's only 5 hours away from me. She was in Arkansas at the time. She's since deceased. But I called up the office and wanted to have a session, a hypnosis session, I should say. Quantum healing hypnosis technique is the method developed by Dolores Cannon. It uncovers past lives, other lifetimes, lets you ask your higher self about karma and relationship questions. You can literally ask anything of your higher self that you would like. So I thought, this is what I need to do, and I'll have a session with her, and that would be wonderful. Called her office and found out she was booked up for years and years, because I did not know she was that big of a deal. But the office was very kind, and they said, well, she's just started teaching people how to use her method. Maybe you can find someone near her that can do this for you. I found someone in the area, and actually I convinced my husband. I'm not sure how, but I convinced him to go as well. Neither one of us got very far with it. Turns out that the practitioner was not doing it as Dolores taught. But the practitioner also said, well, this doesn't happen very often, but if it ever does, then he had someone that he could refer me to. And this was someone who did readings. She's an angel communicator and a medium. So I went to her for an angel reading, and she talked with my team. She introduced me to some of my team and gave me all the answers that I wanted. She started teaching classes. So I started taking all of her classes and found out how this thing works, how the spirit communication, how angels work, how we communicate with them, how we're communicating with them all the time and we don't even know it. And so I started doing readings for people, and I was doing that for a number of years. But always I was thinking, there's this quantum healing hypnosis thing, QHHT, that is really very cool. And years later, what was the question? But years later, I took the QHHT training course, and now I do that as well. But that's really where my journey began. It was like a slow rollout over my life, just following the breadcrumbs. In other words, people just follow what's in front of them. It's so easy to dismiss these things, but I just chose to follow the breadcrumbs and see where they led.
I think, this is only last week I had a conversation with psychiatrist Dr. Bernard Beitman, and he has written a book about meaningful coincidences. And it is the thing that we were talking about, was the importance of being open to possibilities. And also being open to recognizing that these synchronicities, these meaningful coincidences, are indeed meaningful, that they're not just there randomly. And I call them breadcrumbs, you call them breadcrumbs. It's just these little signposts that encourage us to move in a particular direction. But if we're not open to them, then we are closing ourselves off. And I think that is why too many of us don't see, because we're not ready to see. So you started seeing angels or spirits from an early age,
Yeah.
and then that evolved gradually into working as a healer. What experiences have you had that have made you think, was that an angel in human form? As in, was that this an angel that incarnated for this moment, um, but is otherwise in another dimension?
There are a couple in the book. One was actually a worker's truck, but in terms of an actual person, yes, I was going through this dissolution of the marriage, and I was having a very difficult time, as you can imagine. And I was driving, I was crying my eyes out, and I had pulled up to an intersection where there's typically an unhoused person at this intersection. I mean, various unhoused people at this intersection asking for money. And and I thought, oh my gosh, if I look over at this guy, he's going to know that I'm crying, and I don't have any money for him anyway. Um, but as you do, you can't just look away. So I just kind of looked over and made eye contact, and he just went. He just tapped his chest, he nodded his head, closed his eyes, and he pointed up to the sky. Just that, I'm gonna start crying. Like, God's got you. And I knew right then it was Archangel Michael. I don't know how I knew, but I knew it. He just, it was just the feeling that I had. And I work closely with Archangel Michael anyway, but I just knew it was Archangel Michael. Was this Archangel Michael with a breastplate and wings and a sword? No. It was a fairly short, thin, middle to older aged black guy. But the way that he signaled to me, I just knew it was Archangel Michael.
Brilliant.
Right?
That's wonderful. Had you worked with Archangel Michael prior to that, or did that develop after?
That's a good question. Now, if memory serves, I had been working with Archangel Michael, but that certainly got closer after this event. Because I honestly, between the two of us, I talked to Archangel Michael more than I talked to God. He's my guy. And I do seem to remember the work with him just intensified after that experience. I was at a metaphysical fair in Omaha, Nebraska yesterday, just yesterday. It's not too far from Kansas City. And I was walking around this metaphysical fair, and I thought, you know what? I want to check out other readers, see how they work, just see what their energy is, see if they have anything for me that I am not understanding myself. And I was walking around trying to decide, who am I going to sit down with? And I walked by this table. There was this lovely Hispanic woman, older Hispanic woman, but she had this statue, like maybe that big, of Archangel Michael at her table. And I walked by and I walked up to her and I said, "Oh my gosh, is that Michael?" And she said, "Well, yes, of course it's Michael." And I said, "Well, you're my person." And her name was Maria. And I worked very heavily with Mary Magdalene as well, and Mother Mary. And so I said, oh my gosh, you're my person. So I sat down and had a reading with her. It was lovely. It was nice.
Wonderful. Now, I guess, the question a lot of people are going to be asking is, do we have to be special? Do we have to be especially pure or godly in order to have these experiences with angels?
We're all God. All of us are made of that special spark. All of us are God energy. All of us are Christ consciousness. So we're all special. But to answer your question, we don't have to be. I mentioned Joan of Arc and Moses earlier. We don't have to be Joan of Arc or Moses. All of us have a spiritual team working with us. All of us can talk to them and be interacted with by them at any time. And are. You mentioned being open earlier. Those of us who are open to the possibility, it's like, could that have been an angelic experience? All of those who are open to it will know that, yeah, this could be something more special. You know, there's a quote in my book. I think it was a geologer for some reason who had, a geologer or geographer who had said this quote, often attributed to Albert Einstein, that we can look at things as if everything is a miracle or nothing is a miracle. I choose to believe that everything is a miracle. And I think if we just have that level of openness, that what if this is a miracle? Then that I feel like changes everything. Because our perception and our intention, our thoughts, our beliefs really shape the world around us. Why not believe? Why not? Could be just a random guy on a street corner saw that a lady was crying and wanted to offer comfort, or, well, and he probably was just a guy, but I knew he was sent by Archangel Michael, or at least Archangel Michael inhabited that man at that point. I don't know how it works. I don't have to know how it works. I just know that I am being communicated to, and all of us are being communicated to, whether we're aware of it or not. Sometimes it's just a hunch. Sometimes it's a random thought that drops out of nowhere. Sometimes like, oh, I think I'll turn right instead of left. But we all have this all the time. You're smiling. What's happening? Have you had a story like that?
I'm smiling because I'm thinking life is so much more fun if we are open to the possibility that this is real.
Thank you.
You know, I think, what have we got to lose if,
Right.
just by entertaining that possibility? And I think people get very bound to their beliefs, and their beliefs are what they identify too closely sometimes to what they believe. And then it becomes too much of a challenge to themselves to consider something new, to consider something different. And this is why I've asked you the questions I've asked, because there's too much emphasis on the need to be holy or pure as a prerequisite or a condition to be able to reach something that is considered to be heavenly. But we need to remember that if we're looking at the New Testament, Jesus did not exclude anyone on the basis of how holy they were or were not. And in fact, the only people who got a really hard time in his presence were those who professed to be holy and who behaved in ways that lacked compassion. So I think it's important because it means that this door is open to all of us. And that's why I asked you those questions, because it is important that we know that this door is open to all of us. And many people are lost in feelings of guilt and shame and unworthiness, actually these doors are far more open to you than anyone else.
Absolutely. That is where the biggest growth happens when we're facing these challenges, when we're facing lack of faith, lack of confidence, when we're facing shame and everything else. That's the biggest growth opportunity that we can have. Yes, hypocrisy is a huge, huge problem, but I think those people are closed off, right? Let's work with the people who are open to these possibilities and really need this. You know, as you can tell, I'm an American, and in my country, there's just these huge crises. I call it a crisis of faith because there's so many people who are just fundamentally Christian and locked into certain hatreds and judgments that I'm listening to a book about religious fundamentalism right now, and I listened on the way to Omaha yesterday at a 2.5 hour drive, and yes, and it reiterates how Jesus found a huge problem with hypocrisy. What good is your faith if you don't have the works to follow it up? Your faith doesn't count if you don't have the works. And I believe that this is a big problem, but I do feel that there's also this spiritual resurgence, not a religious resurgence, but a spiritual one. And this book actually talks about people who are religious think they're better than so many people, but those who are spiritual are trying to be the best person that they can be.
It is a tricky line.
Difficult line.
Because, and I want to make it absolutely clear that this issue is not exclusively a Christian issue. Every religion has its extreme fundamentalist views. And every religion has the potential to close the door to anything other than doctrine. So I want to make that absolutely clear, because it is deeply unfair to single out Christian traditions, which hold a great deal of wisdom and compassion as well. So this is not exclusively a Christian issue. It is an issue across any belief system which is dogmatic. And I think the issue is less about religion and spirituality, because here we could be playing with semantics. This is entirely about using doctrine as a means of being superior.
That's right. That's absolutely right.
And so it's very important, because when doctrine is used to raise some up above others, then it becomes counter to the philosophies that underpin it, and it loses its spirituality. And so this is why it's important, because an open heart means just that, an open heart that is linked with compassion and linked with understanding, and which is also forgiving. So, and that also is found across all traditions, religious traditions.
I would say fundamental ones, fundamental religious traditions, right? Because there's different degrees.
Exactly. But the notion of the open heart and the need for compassion, I think, is a very important one. So
that's where we come back to having an open mind too, right?
Having an open mind, and also understanding that it is not conditional on people being perfect.
No.
This is unconditional, because what we're talking about here is beings that are the epitome of unconditional love. And therefore, if they are the epitome of unconditional love, it is open for everyone.
Well, and I should say too that angels are not just Christian either. They do span all traditions.
That's right.
Um, so let's see, there is a chapter in the book, Who Are These Angels Anyway? And it's about archangels and ascended masters. There's also a little short section about interfaith angels that all traditions have in their scriptures mention of these beings that are outside of us. So no, and it's not. So people ask me all the time, well, what if you're Hindu? Can you have an angelic experience? Absolutely. What if you are Islamic? Yes. Jewish? Yes. In fact, most of the archangels come from, and ascended masters, many of the ascended masters, I should say, come from the Kabbalah, which is at its heart, a Jewish faith. The Christian Bible comes from the Jewish faith as well. Um, so they're interfaith, and we don't have to be a moral person. We don't have to be a good person. We don't have to be holy. We don't have to, whatever. Yeah. We just have to have an open mind. Have an open mind.
Open mind, and I think also a willingness to explore and to change. And I think that's the other thing, because fear often holds us back. And when we get those nudges and those prods to move in a particular direction, we can resist, and we often do resist because we're afraid of something new. We're afraid of change.
So, well, the whole idea for the podcast came about from that nudge that I kept trying to ignore because, and I tell the whole story in the book, and I had a podcast. I have a second podcast, the Radiate Wellness podcast. That's been going on for years and years. And this was before COVID, mind you. And so, yeah, I started the Radiate Wellness podcast, I want to say 2018. And along the way, I had received a tap on the shoulder from my angels. This was maybe 2019. I don't remember when exactly. That said, you need to learn how to do YouTube. And I said, yeah, I probably should learn how to do YouTube. They said, tell our story. Every week, feature a different being, and that will help you learn YouTube and get our message out. Great. That's fantastic. So I did 52 weeks of Angel Connection. It's on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/radiate wellness. And for an entire year, every week, I covered different archangels, ascended masters, higher self, I don't know, different beings. Well, then fast forward, 2021, it's during the pandemic, and everyone had to go inside. We were supposed to go inside our walls, but we actually went inside and created what I call a post-COVID awakening, because people started finally listening to people on YouTube. It's like, I've always been interested in angels. I've always been interested in spirituality. And so they had the time to look at these things and read books and talk to each other. And there was this huge awakening. Well, about 2021, my guides started tapping me on the shoulder and they said, you need to do a second podcast. I said, no, I'm not going to. I already have a podcast, and I'm a single mom, and I run a group holistic practice, and I have clients of my own. So they tapped me again a couple of weeks later. You need to do a second podcast. Well, finally, they wouldn't leave me alone. I said, fine, but make it easy for me, or easier. They said, what you do is like Jim Harold. Jim Harold's a podcaster. He has paranormal podcasts. One of his podcasts is called The Virtual Campfire, or Jim Harold's Campfire. Yeah, Jim Harold's Campfire. People call him and tell their spooky stories that you would usually tell around a campfire. They said, that will be much easier for you. Well, they lied. It wasn't really that much easier. But I opened it up to people telling their own stories. And it did help a lot. But it's hard to find people to tell their stories. It's getting a little bit easier. So um, that was the format. And then I supplemented with stories from the news. There are stories from the news in the book, the butterfly people of Joplin after their tornado that they had, as well as the Cokeville miracle with a mass shooting. These are all typically American things. And it wasn't a mass shooting. This guy took a school hostage in Cokeville, Wyoming. So there's stories from the news in the book as well to supplement. But for the most part, it's real people telling about their miraculous encounters. And it came as a response to this. Finally, I called it a 2x4 upside the head. A 2x4 for British listeners is a piece of lumber that is specifically 2 inches by 4 inches. But it can be as long as you want. But 2x4 upside the head. And finally I said, fine, I'll do it. But yeah, it's so easy to brush off these nudges, right? I had a client come to me for a reading years ago when I first started working with people. Her mom had passed, and her mom was lovely. Her mom said, well, first of all, she said, this is wonderful. I'm sorry that I had to leave so precipitously. It was a short-lived illness, but very serious. I'm sorry I had to leave so precipitously, but I needed to be on the other side to welcome in a new family member. And but she said, this is great though. I get to be with my family in Shawnee, Kansas. I get to be with my family in Mexico. I get to be with my family in Washington, D.C., all at the same time. Well, maybe 6 or 8 months later, this mom was waking me up in the night, about 3 a.m. every night. Tell my daughter to take vitamins. I'm like, what? No. And you brush it off every night, about 3 a.m., waking me up, tell my daughter to take vitamins. Finally, I said, I'm not getting any sleep. I called this girl, this woman, and I said, your mom is bothering me to tell you to take vitamins. And she said, that's interesting. My husband and I are just talking about starting a family and trying to get pregnant. And we thought the first thing I should do is probably get on prenatal vitamins. Well, it turns out that she got pregnant pretty soon, and that was the mom coming through. She was welcoming a new family member. She was that family member. So the 3 a.m. wake-up calls stopped. But it is so easy. It is so easy, Anna, to dismiss these things, to ignore them, to say, no, I'm not doing that. Or just to say, that's ridiculous. I'm not doing it. Or just to say, that was weird. Maybe I'll do something else. There's a story from Sonia Choquette. Maybe you've heard of her. She's an angel communicator and intuitive, and she writes lots of books on angels. And Sonia Choquette told the story of her ex-husband. And prior to 9/11, he was in financial investments and things like that. Prior to 9/11, he kept getting this idea, this nudge, but he didn't believe. He was shut off to these possibilities. He kept getting this idea, I should move my investments around. And he thought, well, that's silly. Why would I do that? My investments are doing well. Why would I move them around? He kept ignoring this. And 9/11 happened, and he took a huge hit on his investments because they were in, I don't know what they were in, but he took a big hit. So, I mean, it's easy for us to just dismiss these things. But like you said, why not? Why not think it's a miracle or a guidance?
Why not? Indeed. And so I think that your book is great encouragement for us all to pay attention to those nudges that we might otherwise ignore. And the title of the book that we are discussing is Real Life Angel Encounters. And so at this point, I want to thank you, Christi, for your time today.
Thank you, Anna, for having me. I always love talking about angels and how we interact with them.
Beautiful. Now, if people want to find you, how do they do that?
My website is radiatewellnesscommunity.com. Community is because there are several of us. We're a group practice. And you can find information about the book and about me and about the podcasts, both of them, as well as all of our events and all the things we do. We do have a practitioner on your side of the ocean, and that is Mary Jane in Switzerland. She's our astrologer.
Mhm.
So we're an international group. But then people can find the book also anywhere you find books online. Now, you can also ask your local bookshop to carry the book. It's distributed by Simon and Schuster. So, you can get them in bookstores too, but Amazon.com, Goodreads.com, bookshop.org, barnesandnoble.com, all of those places.
Lovely. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Oh, and if I could add one more thing, listen to the Real Life Angel Encounters wherever you get podcasts, as well as on YouTube at Radiate Wellness, or at youtube.com/radiate wellness.
Well, I'll be putting a link to all of those in the description box. And in the description box, you will also find links to my own website. And as Christi has mentioned astrology, a reminder that I also do run astrology classes. So if you are interested, do get in touch. And there is plenty more that is there on my website. And if you want my newsletter, I'll be doing some very interesting things coming up very soon. Until next time, a time in which we will be talking about ancient Egypt and sacred mysticism. Until then, goodbye.